Griffith for what it describes as his reckless suggestions that the institution is fraught with corruption. Griffith is said to have made the allegations in a recent television interview for an international program titled Guns, Drugs and Secrets, dealing with the SOE, which went viral.
Just 2 weeks after lashing out at Dr. Rowley for his statements on the extradition matter of two former UNC financiers, the judiciary is once again expressing its deepest concern over statements and suggestions by another public official. A statement issued today by the Court Protocol and Information Manager Jones P. Madeira denounces the so-called reckless suggestions by the Prime Minister's Security Advisor, Gary Griffith, whom the judiciary says either unwittingly or otherwise linked the judiciary with societal negatives, including corruption, directly attributable to the decision in late August by the executive to declare state of emergency. Mr. Griffith has come under scrutiny for his utterances during an interview in a recent half-hour-long television program titled Guns, Drugs and Secrets, dealing with the SOE. The program was embedded on the World Wide Web by Channel 4 on demand for the international community and would have been viewed by millions of persons.
It's probably no surprise to you to hear that every person I speak to in Trinidad tells me, when I ask them where do the drugs and guns come from, they tell me that the ports, the customs authorities, the Coast Guard and the police are 100% involved in the trafficking of drugs and guns. Why are you not focusing on that?
Every single country in the world will have corrupt police officers, will have corrupt persons in the judiciary, will have corrupt politicians. That is not an avenue to call a state of emergency. We need a state of emergency to stop law-abiding citizens of this country from being killed.
The state of emergency is going to be completely ineffective in dealing with that top-level crime.
Correct.
But that top-level crime is fundamental, because once they're in place and once they stay in place, they can always feed down, and there will always be desperate people at the bottom willing to take their money.
And that, but it's not a state of emergency before, during, or after that is going to stop that. That has to do with the criminal justice system. How did you acquire the assets? So that is legislation.
So exactly, do you not think that these sorts of things should have been brought in before you go through a state of emergency?
That is legislation. In your country, it took years for that to be implemented. You can't wait years to implement legislation to stop innocent persons from being killed on the streets.
The esteemed institution, in responding to that statement, says one can only assume that the top-level crime to which Mr. Rhodes is alluding embraces those described in Mr. Griffith's own words, involving, quote, corrupt police officers, corrupt persons in the judiciary, and corrupt politicians, end quote. According to the judiciary, any reasonable person can conclude from Mr. Griffith's comments, albeit generalizations, that he believes it to be among the establishments, including the port, the police and the Coast Guard, that are corrupt and tied in with the importation of guns and drugs into TNT. Interestingly, it adds that it is not the reporter, but Mr. Griffith, who in the interview introduces the concept of corrupt persons in the judiciary in the same breath with which he speaks of corrupt politicians and police officers to reinforce his agreement with the SOE. The judiciary says it is forced to question, therefore, whether as National Security Advisor to the PM, Mr. Griffith is in possession of any evidence on persons in the judiciary which enables him to so confidently and poignantly link them with the importation of drugs and guns in the country in the current scenario of an SOE. If not, then the judiciary also challenges Mr. Griffith to justify his statement to the national community. In keeping with the requirements of the emergency provisions, the institution notes that the Chief Justice quite promptly set up a tribunal to review the cases of persons detained under the emergency regulations. It should be noted that since the declaration of the SOE, not a single application has been made to that tribunal, according to the judiciary. It assures all that it will remain rigorous in its role as the guardian of the rights of citizens, whether under this nationwide measure or not, but it also issues the strongest warning to public officials that it will not tolerate their contempt.